This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
In a world hooked on extremes, where every headline screams for your outrage or your wholehearted agreement, what happens to the middle ground? You might think the middle ground is the realm of the indecisive, a wishy-washy place where no one takes a stand. But what if I told you that perhaps today's moderate voice is actually the most radical in the room? You see, there was a time when the loudest voice was the one that swung the furthest from the centre. But have the tables turned? Have we had enough of that? Today is it maybe the sensible, the inclusive, the level-headed who are really shaking things up. Why? Because they're redefining what it means to be radical, to be pragmatic, to take idealism and turn it into something that you can actually do rather than something just to fight about. You don't have to set the house on fire to illuminate a room. Sometimes a candle will do. In this episode of the Possibility Club, we're looking at practical bravery and we're diving deep into the audacious world of common sense. Because while others are looking to divide, I want you to meet a young man who's built his mission around unity and reasonableness. Despite his youth, my guest this week is a polymath. Don't let that intimidate you, it just means he's darn good at many things. He's mingled with royalty, he's spoken on United Nations stages, and he's been recognised by the FT as a tech influencer. He's the CEO of the Common Sense Network, a news platform with the rebellious idea that we should understand both sides of a story. Now that's radical. He founded the Apex Group for CEOs and even the BAM project, which dares young boys to reimagine masculinity. Let's debunk the myth that being moderate is dull. I'm not talking about politics necessarily, I'm talking about getting things done. And the voice of my guest is that of a reasoned rebellion, the kind that asks us to think before we leap and seek common ground before we build fences. I'm Richard Freeman, and this is the Possibility Club, and I'm delighted to give you a conversation with a man who makes the ordinary extraordinary, the sense maker in a world gone mad. Meet Michael Omoniyi. Hello. Possibility Club here. Richard Freeman, your, I was going to say enigmatic host. I don't think I'm enigmatic at all. I'm rather predictable and pedestrian, certainly compared to my wonderful guests. And as ever, as part of this series, we're looking at practical bravery. I'm talking to extraordinary people doing extraordinary things, or sometimes ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But the common thread is extraordinary things being done in order to try and create, shape, challenge, support a new future. And my guest today is absolutely no different. I've really enjoyed looking at a lot of his work and talks and reading his writing. And I'm really excited to kind of delve into a world of social entrepreneurialism. Well, I mean, he does so many things. He's a self-proclaimed polymath. Now, that's something I'm gonna challenge and delve into, but actually, I suspect it's true. My guest this week is Mike Omoniyi. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm very, very good. Happy to be at this platform. Yeah, looking forward to how this is received as well by your listeners.
Where are you calling in from today?
I'm in South London, in leafy Beckenham. You know, this is where our studio and office is. So yeah, just a normal Thursday morning.
The Beckenham's even leafy inside by the looks of it. You've got some beautifully arranged internal flora, pot plants, and what looks like a lightsaber vertically poised behind you. So we'll get onto your life as a Jedi shortly.
These are not the drones you're looking for.
What's your week look like? What does somebody with so many different strings to their bow do on a Monday to Friday?
That's a really good starting point, actually, because that will cut across lots of different things. Most weeks for me begin on Sunday, and with Sunday, I'm planning the week, sort of something normal that I think a lot of the people listening will understand. And I have to be particularly disciplined because with what I'm currently occupied with, there's a lot of context switching. So Monday might be a day in the office with writers and journalists because I look after a news network. And then Tuesday might be a meeting with clients because we've got a youth research and marketing agency. And then I might do some content creation on Wednesday because I like to talk about politics and sort of what's happening around the world. So we'll do that. And then Thursday might be a speaking gig somewhere, because that's also something I'm super passionate about. So the week is often very sort of dynamic, as it were. But the golden thread, I think, that connects a lot of my work is I'm very big on sort of bending the levers of power towards justice. And I know that sounds very sort of formal, because I've had lots of time to think about it. But in reality, what it means is I have a very acute awareness of injustice and things that aren't quite the way they ought to be. And I'm just that fussy person that goes, well, we should reorganize things and try to make them a bit better. And so right now, my focuses are, the media, community work more generally. And I do a lot of work with other organizations on boards to help them think about how they bend resources towards people who don't have a lot, as it were. So generally speaking, that's the golden thread that connects a lot of my work.
Big question. Why? Why have such a busy week?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Again, I suppose it's the weight of my curiosity. It's just my curiosity is just too heavy. And sometimes it's definitely a problem more than it's an asset. So as you said, there are periods where I'm like, I am going way too fast. I need to slow down. I need to get away, so on and so forth. But if I'm honest with you, when I was in university, I was studying politics, philosophy, and economics. And yeah, I really was eyeing a job at, I won't say the bank, that offered me a grad role. So that was going to be the sort of plan. And I just got curious about things. I started kind of lifting up stones and seeing what's under them. And I got curious about the mainstream media. I got curious about kind of the distribution of wealth and power and inequality. And these things were just curiosities. I didn't think I would start any businesses or social businesses or anything like that. It was just following curiosity that led me to say, okay, something has to be done about that. As you follow your curiosity, your life tends to look a bit messy. It's just not organized. So I hate meeting new people, if I'm honest with you, because they always go, so what would you do? And I'm like, well, I just, I work in tech. You just want to say something, which is just to pacify the conversation. Because the reality is, I look after a bunch of businesses, some charities, and sit on a bunch of boards. That is really it, if you're thinking about what I do. I will say, though, it isn't just me. I'm not just a sole crusader sort of trying to change the world, say. A lot of these organizations are 5 years old. A lot of them have staff. A lot of them are organizations in their own right. And if you visited one of them, you wouldn't really know about me. I'm just a guy that's connected to all of them, hence why it seems messy. But they are all thriving organizations in their own right.
But when do you measure impact? When do you measure success? What does success look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's really good. I mean, there's sort of a personal component of that, which I'm sort of ruminating over, which is what does success look like? And then obviously we have funders, we have partnerships, we have relationships. We also have to be able to articulate, success for them to make their investment worth it, and so on and so forth. On a personal level, I know we're literally 10 minutes into the conversation. I don't know if you want to get all meta and philosophical on you.
Absolutely do.
You're like, yes, please. On a personal level, when I sort of go to bed at night, not every night, obviously, but most nights, I do sort of think about whether I made the world somewhat brighter, whether my unique contribution advanced things is the world brighter because of the work I'm doing. I'm a philosophy major. That's sort of how I deal in like big, grandiose kind of ideas. That's just what goes on in my mind most of the time. Now, if there's maybe 5 days, 2 weeks in a row where the answer is no to that question, then it's often for me a indication that I need to maybe switch things around, change things. Maybe I'm, barking up the wrong tree. On a business level, the Common Sense Network is a news network that's trying to bring people from different perspectives together to learn from each other. So we're trying to curtail and combat polarization, the division we see in society. And so we've identified sort of what success looks like for us. So it might be, how many people joined our community from across the political spectrum. To what degree are we upskilling young people to be able to sort of navigate echo chambers? So we've got all the stuff we do with young people, with members of our community, that we're always asking questions of, is it working? Our assumption that people are curious and don't want to live in echo chambers, is it working with the work we're doing? Are we actually seeing an increase in numbers and things like that? So that's how I measure things for that business. And, and all the other things I'm part of, they'll have their own metrics. But generally speaking, I'm really, really motivated to make the world brighter in some capacity. And for me, that means combating injustice in some way. So every time I hear a young person message me and say, oh, I got into this internship now because of this program that maybe I had a hand in creating, genuinely makes me feel good. The stress is worth it. I used to have an afro a few years ago that's gone now, and I'm clinging on to the last bit of hair strands I've got. So I'm always asking, was this worth my afro? Oftentimes it's no. More times than no, I get yes. And it makes me kind of keep going.
You talked about the Common Sense Network, and I'm keen to hear a bit more about that and sort of the mission behind that, the drive behind that. So tell me a bit more about the network and how that philosophy is driving it.
What I mean when I say common sense, and what I've always meant is, I was that kid who probably got accused of sitting on the fence a lot growing up, because I just never felt uber passionate about anything. I always felt as though I would change my mind frequently. I would read something and go, oh my gosh, that's so true. And I read something, I'm like, yeah, actually, no, that's true. And that was me, right? And so I found it quite difficult being in university when you were almost asked. I went to Manchester University, by the way. So you're almost sort of forced to pick a side. Are you left wing or are you right wing? And I'm like, a bit of both, if I'm honest, So when I say common sense, I meant sort of the process of deciphering or working out what you believe through kind of logical thinking, through kind of exploration, sort of just being someone who was curious and could follow that curiosity and arrive somewhere. And what I found was routinely, especially again in 2017 when I started the network, in the UK, you had sort of right-wing bubbles, you had left-wing bubbles, and they almost certainly never sort of spoke to each other. And you were almost being asked as a young person to believe wholesale what one wing of politics kind of believes. And I found it very interesting because I joined the Labour Party and I found that a lot of my exploration was being numbed, almost as to be like, there are people smarter than you who have thought about this. Just say what they say. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, well, no, I would like to kind of explore and sort of figure out if I agree with this or I agree with that, or do we need to have a bigger government or smaller government? I want to be able to explore that, but it didn't seem that there was space for that to happen. So the Common Sense Network was born really out of that frustration of the sort of simplicity and the caricaturization, if that's a word, that opposite sides of the political wing would do to each other. Mm-hmm. So we created this kind of middle ground, if you like, where people could explore and kind of learn from each other, and left-wing people, right-wing people could come together in this kind of utopian sense and go, oh my gosh, I do agree with you on this, or I do agree with you on that. Now, initially it was a group chat, of like 100 and something people shouting at each other. Mm-hmm. Very quickly, I realized that wasn't an organization and probably wasn't very sustainable. And so slowly we've morphed into a news network, a research and marketing agency, and we actually put out products and things. And the kind of core North Star is to build and to have a society where echo chambers were less fashionable, and we celebrated more people stepping into the middle, joining together to work on things. I think about Clement Attlee, and I think about some governments that were born out of national need. I really get excited. I know it's very kind of dorkish and kind of nerdy, but I get really excited at the idea of an issue being big enough that different kind of political opposites can come together and say, let's join both our thinking to try and solve this, rather than we'll try left-wing politics and ideas for 10 years, then we'll try the right wing for 10 years, and we'll kind of go back and forth, each time, each one arguing that if the other one has a go, it will be an existential, failure. You kind of go, isn't there a way to come together and be more sort of pragmatic about some of these issues?
Do you see that as now maybe it's the responsibility of people outside of politics to find that common ground?
I literally had Rory Sutherland on the podcast we had recently, and we were talking about how less and less young people seem to be interested in getting involved in politics. And even myself, I grew up, like a typical PPE person. I was really thinking about being in politics, being an MP, so on and so forth. And now that I've been in business, social entrepreneurship, I really believe that it's very possible to achieve way more privately than, in politics. It now feels like it gets in the way now, right, of your thinking.
Though, isn't it?
It's really quite sad. Yeah, of course. And it's funny thing is, I told Rory this, like, I do believe that politics is still sort of unmatched as it pertains to sort of social change. You can do social change en masse. The legacy part of politics, the fact that if you put something into law, it becomes pretty much the standard. Like, it's such a wonderful opportunity. And there's only space for one idea at a time, it seems.
But the purest form of democracy, should be absolutely powering politics as this, this collective voice, this, the common sense solution, because everybody is kind of getting together and figuring out, how the best possible solution. But it feels like politics has become more about defending the indefensible rather than making change, kind of maintaining the status quo so much of the time.
I think it's because we have a sort of winner takes all system, if I'm honest with you, where if you win, you're in government. If you lose, you can't do anything. The most you can do is criticize, and we need to think about ways to redistribute power to maybe try and ensure we don't have such a winner takes all system. And there are folks who work in this area who are working to sort of help rethink how our political system, whether it's changing the voting system right now, or it's kind of giving more power to civic bodies or whatever it is. I just think we've got to rethink how we do it, because right now, ordinary people aren't that ideological. They have a set of needs that they want met, and they want to have the freedom to explore and sort of be their full selves. And it seems as though, because of the culture wars, we're all being dragged into being very ideological, when most times we're like, I like a bit of that. I like a bit of that. I agree with them here. I disagree with them there. I don't know who in the world could look at Partygate and go, yeah, that's great. But at the same time, maybe people do believe that we should have a smaller sized government and leave more things to individual sort of charity. You get the gist. My point is we're a mixture of different ideas. And I think the kind of being forced into one thin way of thinking is what a lot of people don't want to be.
Well, Partygate is a great example of a massive distraction, because actually most people look at that and what they see is a failure of leadership. It's about integrity, and it's about people being a bit dishonest or not really reading the room or not really understanding what their responsibility is. It's not about which side are you on, left or right, or is this a witch hunt about some particular individuals because of their politics.
And very quickly, it got spun into the left-wing, right-wing thing. And if you're left, you want him out. If you're right, you got to protect him and really defend it indefensible and go, well, they work very hard, so the party is a lot. You go, come on, mate, come on.
This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible. But who are we?
Always Possible works with ambitious businesses, charities, and public services that are thinking about what's next.
From architects to aerospace companies, puppet theatres to primary schools, business networks to big data analysts.
If you're wanting to be brave with some big decisions, or to be clearer about what to prioritise, then an award-winning workshop from the Always Possible team is a brilliant starting point.
We care about just one thing: building ideas that work.
For creative, intuitive, and practical expertise, consider Always Possible as your strategic partner. Find out more about how we could power up your mission. Visit alwayspossible.co.uk.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
You've described the Common Sense Network as a news. A news what? Is it a news agency? Is it a publishing platform? Are you curating news?
So what we've done is, so we're a few years out from building a news aggregator app, which I think will get closer to the North Star of what we're trying to create. We've sort of flirted with different ways of doing this thing in the past. So there was a period in which where we had all our journalists sort of give the information, sort of kind of what happened with a piece, and then have left-wing and right-wing journalists both going back and forth explaining what it means. So you get a chance to read two perspectives with every news article. Mm-hmm. Then there was a period where we kind of tried a technological thing where if you click on an issue like Brexit, you'd get takes from across the political spectrum. All these different things are very expensive. They take time. And so we've sort of been working out how to make this sort of big dream we have a reality. And we're settling on a tech solution. So we are a news network generally, in that we have some pieces that are just pure sort of information news as what happened. We have left-wing and right-wing people offer their takes on issues. We are increasingly trying to, through video, provide commentary from multiple perspectives. But this brings me onto the problem of what we're trying to fix, because one of the biggest issues I think, or mistakes people make when they spot an issue is, they spot an issue and they immediately start thinking about the solutions. Then that probably sounds very rational to anyone listening. But what young people, and I think anyone of any age must do far more often, is to kind of work out, how did we get here? How has the problem come to be? Mm-hmm. Namely, one, who thinks there's a problem? Because I used to always say the mainstream media was broken until I said it once, that an older lady corrected me and said, no, it works for who it was made to work for. Mm-hmm. It's not broken at all. And I said, yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. It's
same
like
with politics.
People, it works very well right now. That got me thinking, okay, who does it work well for? Then I started reading into stats and realizing that 3 men basically control about 71% of newspaper circulation in the UK. No way does he own all those papers. It's like, yeah, he does. I'm like, but is that allowed? And, and all these different things. And then I realized, to change things, there's a reason why there's not a new news network starting every week. It's because it's not profitable. It's very hard to make money from. It's very difficult. And I found that, I was just optimistic at the start. And now I'm thinking way more sort of stringently about profiting and employing people and ensure. I mean, we just had like 3 newspapers close in the last 3 months. You had Gowdom close, which was a newspaper for, I think, Black and non-binary women. You had Al Jazeera UK, I think, is closing. Vice is declared bankruptcy. I mean, if these sort of bigger, more established papers and organizations and news networks are saying it's not working financially, then of course we've got to think and be far more robust about, how do we actually build a good thing? People complain about the Sun, but they still read it. People hate the Daily Mail, but they still give it the clicks and therefore give it the ad revenue. And when we provide news that people, quote unquote, want, there's a sense in which people are kind of like, oh, it's good, it'll always be there. And it's like, no, good disappears quickly if you don't fund it, support it, and really champion it. It's interesting because the media age has sort of democratized creation. So we, as a network, could not have existed 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible, right? For a number of different reasons. And now we do exist, and we're okay. We have a runway. We're not about to go out of business or anything like that. And we're quite small, but there's a bunch of sort of bigger networks out there. You've got Novara Media on the left. You've got Spiked on the right. You've got a bunch of independent news outlets that do quote unquote exist. And I say that quote unquote because a lot of them are sort of smaller parts of some bigger things, which is another issue. But I suppose what seems to be working in our industry is sort of subscription-based businesses. So, New York Times have their sort of 10 million subscribers, and I think The Economist has something north of 450,000. So, but the thing is, they've had 100-year head starts. Right.
Well, and they've got Wordle.
That's that as well. That's that. So they've got these big sort of long legacy sort of subscribers and folks who grew up, their dad bought them their first subscription, these sort of stories. Whereas we're a few years old, you can count how many years we've been alive in one hand. Mm-hmm. So we're still very, very new. And so we're exploring lots of different things. We've been thinking, for a while now about subscription and what that would look like. Right now, we're powered really by work we do with brands and other organizations that want to make society healthier as well through our research and marketing agency. We're exploring grants. I mean, you really have to be very dynamic when you're our size to make it through COVID, stay alive, and be able to be employing people. I don't think people understand how in the news business, that is nothing short of a miracle. We want to be meaningful. We want to solve the problem at scale. We do lots of work in schools, for instance, upskilling young people in how to spot fake news, how to spot emotional manipulation, how to avoid echo chambers. But whilst that's amazing to see 200 young people be like, wow, that was great, or 300, say you really helped us. I'm also very interested in scale and the fact that this problem is very big. It's global. It's a massive issue. So part of my work for the next 5 years, if you follow that arc, will be how do we take what we're doing, build a technological solution, and try to solve it at scale, which is why we're doing a seed round, which is why we're going to raise money, which is why we're going to build an app, because we know that to really make a dent in this issue and the kind of increasing need for advertising revenue, there's a reason why Daily Mail do what they do, because it's all about clicks now. It's just all about clicks. And so the more salacious, the more dramatic, the more money you get. So from a business perspective, you can see that where the temptation is, right? And so for us, we know what we're going to have to do to build something meaningful, of worth, that has good ethics. And my hope is that people respond well to it.
all boats rise with the tide, essentially.
That's good.
If we make systems of business better, if we make systems of leadership better, then it means we have a better economy, a better workforce, a better sense of social justice running through the economy. So how do you convene that? How do you get taken seriously? How do you that's quite a big thing to stand up and say, look, I want you to gather around what I'm doing here, and I want you to let go of some of your own secrets and ego and share. That's easier said than done, I think, with a lot of business leaders.
No, for sure. For sure. And yeah, I think you're right about the boats rising together. I'm lucky, I suppose, because I started sort of doing random stuff when I was 13. Even though I'm 29 in a few months, I feel like I'm doing a lot of these things for a long time. But it's interesting because I was thinking about it the other day and I thought to myself, I've been public speaking for 15 years. And I thought, that can't be correct. And I started working it out. And it was, I did a national public speaking competition. I came fourth and traveled to different countries, public speaking at a very, very young age. I've been public and doing things and starting projects, closing projects, all that sort of stuff for a while. And a lot of friends I have now, we're also doing similar things at 14. We're members of youth parliament, young mayors. I was a UK young ambassador to the European Union. Worked in the Cabinet Office, worked at British Council, all these things. Whilst I should have been doing my work, and focusing in school, I was traveling to countries in Europe, doing lots of random stuff from a very young age. And so it feels like I have considerable skin in the game, even though I'm younger, say. So I've never really faced the sort of, oh, you're only a child thing. I suppose if we're maybe applying for funding sometimes and I put just my age, I imagine there might be some bias there. If I'm honest with you, I really have no stories of crazy bias. I suspect one of the reasons why some of those initiatives have been successful and we have had people join is because what I'm articulating, people know very deep down and feel. So for instance, if you're a Black founder, you know that whilst 50% of businesses fail in the first year, as they say, it's something like 80-something% for Black founders. Which means if you're a Black founder and your business lasts like 2 or 3 years, like you should get a medal because it's just like you're an outlier. So people know that when I say that, they feel it instinctively, like masculinity, right? When I talk to young people about masculinity, when I tell them that these are, especially kids maybe that aren't in part of like really well off schools, when I say that the only route available to you is not sport, they feel that. They're like, oh, thank God you said that, because it feels as though that's my ticket out of here. Helping them realize there's all these jobs that they can't even imagine that exist. For a lot of them is game changing to go, well, I could be a climate scientist, or I could be a a researcher. I could work for Oxfam in Zambia. Like there's so many opportunities that we can't even think about that exist. That masculinity has traditionally been sort of so thinly defined as sort of being stoic. And then if you're from a certain school doing this job, that when I come in to say that let's expand it, it's like a breath of fresh air to a lot of these guys who know what I'm saying.
I think there's probably something that comes through your philosophy as well. There's something about where you've put your flag in the sand to kind of say, actually, there is a curiosity, to go back to your word, there's heavy curiosity, there's an openness. There have been people that have tried to do what you're doing before, but have come at it with an agenda. They've come at it with a very specific perspective that they've not really wanted to shift. And certainly when you're talking about kind of leadership and so on, it can appear on the surface to be something quite collegiate and collaborative and progressive, but actually underneath, really, it's just a quick way to build status or something. But I think what comes across what you're doing, is that curiosity is writ large. So I imagine there are people that probably give you a bit more space, a bit more leeway. They want to work with you and for a bit longer because that threat's not there, and that kind of sense of you're not hiding something a bit more malevolent.
What's so interesting though, as you say that, I mean, I find that a really interesting insight from you, but I also think even people I've met, because this is so interesting. I did not fancy myself like an entrepreneur. I actually don't think I have the personal skills for it. I may have developed some, but I certainly didn't have at the start. Namely, I'm a researcher, but I am your classical go down like a Wikipedia link wormhole person where I'm reading about some random thing. I'm like, how did I get here? Because I clicked 12 links, right? Yeah. I like searching things, I like being alone, exploring. That's my personal kind of thing. Doing the whole entrepreneur thing and learning how to sort of be kind of decisive and what was so tough. I had a group of 100 people in a WhatsApp group, and I literally governed by consensus. Mm-hmm. Everybody, let's vote. That's all I did all the time. Like, what did most people agree with? Kind of being that person. You want everyone to like you. You want everyone to support you, to believe in you, so on and so forth. So I was probably a terrible leader at the start because the people were like, but what should we do? And I'm like, well, let's see what everyone thinks. And it's like, no, you need to make a call. You need to make a call. And then I probably swung to the right where I was like, everyone does what I say. And I'm like, okay, that's all.
We're going to hustle.
This is it. So working out how to kind of be in that middle, to be your most authentic self. I know I lean more towards communitarian ways of doing things. That's just my kind of personal proclivity. Learning that, but tempering it to know that even though I lean that way, I do need to make a call. And when I make a call, it may go wrong. And when it goes wrong, I can't say, oh, well, it's the market. I have to go, I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. That was a bad call, as it were. I say all of that to say that people I've met in business who have been very sort of like cutthroat, I've often found it comes from insecurity more than them having this kind of knowledge or secret Gnostic thing that we all don't have access to. It's like, no, they just overproject because of uncertainty. And learning how not to do that is difficult. And I think more business leaders need spaces with other business leaders, because oftentimes it's hard to do it with your team. If you're talking to a team member saying that, I don't know if our runway lasts a year, they're looking for another job straight away. So you've got to find a way to sort of be vulnerable, but in a way that's tactful, that makes sense, that's not going to cause undue alarm and stress to the people who are following you.
What you've described there is leadership, and it's that self-awareness, it's that understanding. Leadership comes from every chair, and the best leaders are those that enable those around them, but with decisiveness, with the ability to take responsibility, and as you say, not just projecting out this kind of fragile performance of break things and then leave someone else to clear up the mess type stuff. That's not leadership. That's chaos.
And it's funny because that's what's celebrated. If you look at
it, absolutely is.
Like Elon Musk, for instance, right? I was having a chat with a friend not too long ago. Yeah. Obviously, we don't know how he operates or what he does, but in terms of what's been reported with Twitter, yeah. He sort of came in, fired a lot of people. What do you do? Whatever. I get why that fits the sort of mystic sort of great man, maverick founder sort of narrative arc that we all celebrate in culture. But there's people who've been working there for 9 years. It's not cool to just kind of be like, you're all gone.
What people are celebrating is the fact that he's very, very rich. But 100 years after he's died, he's going to be famous for being very, very rich. He's going to be famous for probably the businesses he built and burnt, It's probably just because I watched the final of Succession last night. I'm
no spoilers. I haven't seen it yet.
I'm not going to give you any, but my head is in that space of, legacy is about what you change, what you build, what you add, the value you add. It's hard to take hard and fast leadership lessons from someone whose behavior is so destructive.
This is it. But also someone who we're not close enough to really know anything meaningful about. There's this phrase I talk about all the time, the fact that distance creates distortion, and the further we are away from something, the harder it is to ascertain its virtues, its value, and so if all we're reading is stuff online about what he does, then it's very hard to make him a hero in any sense other than the successes we know about his company. But we all know he's not there building the actual cars. It's a company. The etymology of company is literally a group of people. It's a company of people. So ultimately it's about other people. The halo effect thing, I think, is a real danger in today's sort of social media culture, that if someone's a great politician, then they must give great relationship advice. And you go, no. I remember seeing a video on YouTube once, like Elon Musk's life philosophies. And I'm like, what does building an electric car company that's done very well have to do with sort of philosophy for life? You don't have to take everything from this one person because they succeeded in this one very specific, definite area. Be very careful about sort of taking relationship advice from Elon Musk and romantic advice from Jeff Bezos doesn't seem very wise to me.
No, thank you. What do you want to be famous for? When you're not in the room, what do you want people to be saying about you? When, in 100 years, 200 years time, and your kids or grandkids or whatever, or the next generations of people working on your projects, what do you want them to be saying is the legacy of what you were trying to do and managed to do?
Yeah, no, sorry for the pause. I just want to make sure I say the truth and not just sort of a general thing. If I'm honest, not to get sort of too dark on you, but I don't know if I want to be remembered too much.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, honestly, if they say, he had a go, he kind of saw a problem and tried to fix it, and he's given us a bunch of sort of practices and things that we can also follow in to fix it, then I almost don't really care too much what's sort of said about me. I've always found it interesting because the legacy question I think about quite frequently, and each time I never really arrive at something that feels true about what I want to leave. I don't want to be a great man, or I don't want a statue. I don't want any sort of he was great. Like that stuff just doesn't appeal to me at all. It's very odd, but it just I feel nothing about sort of being romanticized as like a great person. That doesn't really. I
don't think that's odd at all. I think it's more odd to want that. If I'm
okay, makes me feel a bit better, I suppose. But maybe it's because I'm a Christian as well, so I almost know I'm going to be forgotten. And if they say I tried, because I think that's one thing I can definitely say is true about my work right now, is that I'm genuinely trying. And it's why I feel really sort of called to the underdogs, people who try, who just kind of have a go. I always love triers. So maybe that's it. Just that they say that I had a go, I tried, I really put myself out there to make it work. And if it works, amazing. If not, he tried.
I think that's really profound. Anything coming up this year that we should let listeners know about, or we can point to in the show notes?
I know there's a One Young World conference coming up soon, which is exciting for young leaders who are interested. One Young World is this platform it's a global platform really for young leaders trying to make the world healthier, trying to make the world better, and they come together through sort of keynote addresses, seminars in big summits, where they can come together, collaborate, rub minds together, try and work together. And because there's young people from literally over 180 countries, you get a chance to see what's happening in different parts of the world. And that's really healthy for someone like myself that sometimes gets really bogged down into the problem they're trying to fix, to go, oh my God, what's happening in Bogota? What's happening in Canada? What's happening in Zambia, so to speak? That was a really great part of my journey, sort of going in 2018 to The Hague and just meeting like-minded people who I'm still in contact with now. So that's coming up. And beyond that, I'm sort of, oddly enough, doing more of these things, talking about what we're doing, because I have a habit of sort of just focusing on what we're doing. And people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm busy. And now it's like, let's actually talk about it. Let's invite people in. Let's do more media. I used to do a lot of news back in the days, but I just literally do nothing now. So, if your listeners are curious, they can follow me, follow the work we do, and they'll probably see a lot more from us because we're putting a lot out. Now we're right at the cusp of really sort of exploding with content we put out. Hopefully some things will resonate, some things will be interesting. And if they're curious about media, then they should definitely watch Common Sense Network, because even that is just us building in real time and sort of morphing and changing as we try to solve and follow this problem.
Thank you so much. Mike Omoniyi, thank you for being part of the Possibility Club. Thank you for listening to the Possibility Club, Practical Bravery. If you enjoyed this episode, do like, share, review, tell everybody about it. Look in the show notes for all the details of today's guest, stuff we talked about, stuff that's of interest, new things to read, new things to listen to. And if you are running a business or a charity and you are trying to accelerate or improve the impact that you have in the world, if you want to be famous for what you do and what you change rather than just what you sell, then talk to us. alwayspossible.co.uk. We want to hear from you, we want to talk to you, we want to amplify and elevate your ideas, and who knows, we might be able to help you feel more confident and clear about what's next. alwayspossible.co.uk. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new special guest and a new insight on practical bravery in action.
The Possibility Club is an Always Possible podcast. The interviewer was Richard Freeman for Always Possible, and the producer and editor was me, Chris Thorpe Tracy, for Lo-Fi Arts. Have a good week.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
Lo-Fi Arts.